Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2021. And that brings us to that release, which has been designated by Criterion at spy number 1104. It is a film from 1941, and the name of the filmmaker is Orson Welles. And the name of the work is Citizen Kane. This is the work from 1941, and it has among its legendary cast people like Joseph Cotten and Dorothy Comingore and Agnes Moorehead and Ruth Ward, Ray Collins, Erskine Sanford, Everett Sloane, William Allen, and others. And among its crew, which is also very legendary, we have, for example, Greg Toland's work as a director of photography, the music of Bernard Herrmann. We have also the writing or co-writing, which is a very interesting point in and of itself, the contributions of Herman Mankiewicz. And of course, we have one other figure that seems to be towering over everything here in this majestic and righteous and incredibly masterful way in terms of the cast and crew. And I'm speaking, of course, about Orson Welles. This is the work from Orson Welles, 1941's work, Citizen Kane. Now, I think one of the great and rewarding, or possibly rewarding challenges that any film enthusiast or cinema viewer may have is, or one of them anyway, is to talk about Citizen Kane and to talk about its plot and its story structure, because I think one of the great beauties and joys of watching this film, this awesome, awe-inspiring work, Citizen Kane, is the fact that I think it is so much a film that is endless in terms of its infinite possibilities of interpretations and takes and perspectives about what it means and also what it is about. And so I think that's one of the great rewarding challenges in terms of an experience of watching this film, Citizen Kane. But for purposes of today, let us try to focus in on one of such possible perspectives as to what this film, Citizen Kane, could be about. And let's focus, therefore, first on the specific constructs and the mechanics of the story or plot. And so what we have is essentially a journey or voyage by a certain group of people that are more or less nameless, or who could stand in for us, the viewers. And we have, of course, William Allen, who is seen, or perhaps more accurately, not quite seen. We see him in shadow or silhouette or from the back of his head, etc., but we never see his face full on. So we see this type of narrator slash journey person, a reporter slash journey person that is essentially assigned to try to find out the specific aspect of Charles Foster Kane, and the MacGuffin, or the hook of the plot, if you will, is that there is a particular word that this figure, Charles Foster Kane, who is an important, extremely wealthy, and highly influential figure who has recently passed away. And it is discovered that one of, if not his last dying moments, were to speak out this mysterious phrase of Rosebud. And so the thought or conceit is to try to find out what this word, this mysterious and seemingly random phrase, Rosebud, what this phrase rosebud might mean. Why would someone as influential and as powerful, as super powerful as Charles Foster Kane in his last moments of life mouth out this final phrase of rosebud? So this forms the hook into the quest by the William Allen character, and thus us, the viewers. The quest into discovering what the meaning of rosebud is, and ultimately, therefore, hopefully, maybe, discovering what the meaning of the life of Charles Foster Kane was. And so this becomes the crux or conceit that carries us through this labyrinth, this maze, this beautiful, wondrous cinematic journey that where we meet many figures in the so-called present day, that they take us through various, say, incarnations or forms, either directly or indirectly, as may be the case. But throughout those various forms, we get glimpses into the past, the life of the now deceased Charles Foster Kane. But through the magic of Orson Welles' cinema, Charles Foster Kane comes to life through various episodes that carry us through, and through the examination or experience of these various episodes, starting from when he was a little boy who is living in what appears to be this very modest, perhaps even state of poverty with his mother and father, but we understand that through a certain set of circumstances involving a vast windfall fortune of his mother, the decision is made to bring Charles Foster Kane, the young boy, into more quote-unquote upper class society in terms of his finances, but that unfortunately brings him away from his mother, and we see then jumps into the near future, or the immediate future of him growing up, or we get glimpses of him growing up, and then we suddenly realize that through or via his connections with his vast now newly established sources of wealth, he is able to further accumulate more and more tangible and intangible assets over his life, and that leads him to the power and control and perhaps, yes, creativity in terms of running a particular newspaper. And so this becomes one of the key, say, moments that is all, or key quests or key components of the life of Charles Foster Kane, and that we understand that he thus becomes the head of this particular newspaper venture. As he says, I think it would be fun to run a newspaper. But then we go through his life and his various associates in his various, say, attempts at conquest, whether that conquest or that thirst for conquest, or perhaps another way to say it, that thirst for power, whether that be truly engendered due to some kind of genuine and profoundly, say, progressive wish to, maybe in his words at some point in the film, his wish to make the lives of quote unquote ordinary people better, or whether these ambitions of Charles Foster Kane are perhaps due to some other implicit or hidden, or maybe not so hidden, aspects of his own life, namely his own maybe ambition or his own greed or selfishness. Whatever the case may be, undoubtedly we are presented with one of the most complex and complexly portrayed characters in cinema. And he is made all the more complex by the fact that the more we get to seemingly know him, or the more we think we know Charles Foster Kane through these various episodes, including his desire to seek public office, or his relationships with certain women in his life that lead him to further ambitions involving, say, music and opera, and what that leads to in terms of his own relationships as he too is getting older and older and older, and the rises and falls, the ups and downs, the triumphs and the tragedies that befall Charles Foster Kane, what we come to realize as we get to seemingly know more about him, or the more we think we know about him as we watch this progression of episodes from Orson Welles and Company. One of the great tricks of this film is that the more we think we know, in fact, the less we know. And the more maybe deep, the deeper we get into his life story, perhaps we realize that there are more mysteries, there are more things that remain unlocked, and that perhaps are indeed truly inaccessible. One of the most famous aspects, one of the most famous images that opens the film, in terms of the viewpoint from various angles of this grand palace, this almost palace of doom, in a manner of speaking, which is called Xanadu. One of the great aspects of this, and it's filled with many great aspects, one of the great aspects is it's taken from multi-angles, and everything seems to be, in terms of a lit window, it seems to be in a fixed point, even though the multi-angle feature is used from place to place to place to place to give us the grandness of scale, but also to suggest to us the fact that we are going to get multiple perspectives on this story that is about to be told to us. That's one of the great aspects of that opening sequence, and it's a great metaphor for things to come. And then also another great aspect is that it focuses in on the sign, which is no trespassing. I think it's a wonderful type of conceit that's commented upon on some of the commentary tracks, which we'll talk about in the later discussion of Citizen Kane and the Criterion collection. But one of the great aspects of that too is no trespassing. Indeed, with this work of cinema, we as viewers are in a way trespassing into the life of Charles Foster Kane, in the quest, in the adventure, in trying to solve the mystery of Rosebud. But in doing so, in trespassing into his life, in a manner of speaking, perhaps we come to realize along the way that, again, the more we think we know, in fact, the less we know. And the more we think we know, the more mysteries become known to us. And if that's the case, then who is Charles Foster Kane? At the end of the day, when we've finished watching this film, do we really know him? Do we think we know him? Or perhaps what we think we know is in fact not even the person himself. And so this type of inherent and fundamental, say, contradiction is one of the brilliant aspects of this. So, what it means is, in terms of an interpretation exercise, one can watch this film over and over and over and over again. And much like the various angles of Xanadu, much like the various angles of perspective of the many people that are interviewed and who give their perspectives on who Charles Foster Kane was from their point of view, bias and all, with all those varied angles, we too come to realize that the story of Charles Foster Kane, indeed the story of Citizen Kane, can also be viewed from many angles. And depending on what angle, what vantage point we espouse at a given viewing, our ideas and our interpretations, and indeed our, say, readings of this film could change and alter. And that happens every single time. And that, I think, is a testament to the complex richness of the story that's being told, and also the elusive nature of the manner in which it is being told. This is a film that is, I think, very proudly a feat of cinematic magic. But another way to say that is that it is an exercise, a brilliant, brilliant exercise, or a series of exercises in smoke and mirrors, excuse me, in the idea that what we are talking about is an illusion. Cinema, in many ways, is a type of illusion, and it uses tricks and techniques that are incredibly technically advanced, especially for its time. And even now, when one realizes that we're talking about these incredible techniques of, say, the expansion of space by showing low angles and then trying to deal with the ceiling aspects or the movement of the camera and how to adjust the set in order to try to maneuver this huge piece of equipment around, this heavy, huge piece of equipment, which is essential for filming the particular scene, or maybe the use of lighting or the use of perspective, the use of lenses in order to try to capture something in the foreground and also in the background, and the shifting perspectives when things move from background to foreground, what that means in terms of the technical accomplishments of that, and the the way that lighting needs to be adjusted to capture things with such precision and accuracy in a far distance of the room, also at the same time, and oftentimes within the same shot, also at the same time having to capture something that is very close up. And to be able to do that either in camera or to do it imperceptibly using some kind of optical shot or optical post-process illusion is also a feat. And this is just a small sampling of the types of technical accomplishments that are embodied within the filming aspect of Citizen Kane. Not to mention, of course, the fact that we are dealing with the structure of this film in terms of its jumping back and forth in chronology. Sometimes we get a young Kane, suddenly we are thrust into a very elderly Kane, and then oftentimes we get even further shots down in terms of his advancing of age, but then we go back to his younger days in his early 20s, etc., and then growing up gradually, and we see all those progressions, not just of him, but of all the characters that we meet, his close associates, his close-knit circle of family and friends, who also, as characters, undergo the same jumping of chronology. So we have the technological feats, excuse me, of the cinematic crafts of Kane, and the camera work and the lighting and the lenses and the framing, etc. And then we have the brilliance of how this illusion of life and the span of years is held together with the brilliance of, say, the makeup and also the power of the performance. Joseph Cotten and Orson Welles and Everett Sloane, etc., Dorothy Comingore, etc. Whenever we jump from one time to another time, we can really feel the age and years, etc. And it's a real feat when we're considering the makeup appliance and the like, and the way that the body language is different from period to period to period, etc. So there is this incredible type of performance that is also going on. So it's the technical aspects, it's the performative aspects, and also it is the type of story or psychological aspects that are embedded within Citizen Kane itself, because we realize too that everything seems to have some kind of perhaps meaning or significance in terms of choices and the consequences. And those consequences oftentimes could be linked to a type of psychological profile or psychological investment or motivation on the part of various characters. And that psychological profile is oftentimes placed in the context of things like, say, jealousy, of passion, of attraction toward, say, other people, of a type of admiration, of a desire to want to do something, whether that desire be some kind of desire to want to make some kind of change, a progressive change in society, whether that desire is indeed healthy or not healthy, whether that desire is indeed genuine or not genuine, and betrayal, when one realizes that what one has believed in or what one thinks of someone is indeed not the case. I think one of the key aspects of this type of super complex human relationship could be said, for example, in the relationship between the characters of Orson Welles and Joseph Cotten. So that is just one exquisite example of this, as well as the characters of Orson Welles and Dorothy Comingore. So this is these are just but two of many examples of the way in which human relationships and human dynamics form the foreground or form the context upon which this examination of sort of human psychological portraits is constantly being made, and the dynamics are being shifted. And indeed, I should say, going back to the notion of smoke and mirrors, of illusion, of creating something out of nothing. This notion, too, of this film being seen as a type of psychological portrait of, say, the character of Charles Foster Kane, I think is a very sound one. But at the same time, it's, again, what I mentioned before, the more one thinks one knows, the less one knows, because the more one sees the film as, say, scenes or choices that Kane makes that are due to, say, some kind of deep-rooted psychological motivation, I think the more one realizes that one can even look at that and have a different perspective, and perhaps question indeed whether our initially judged or initially perceived psychological motivation of the character is really there, or perhaps there's something completely different going on within the mind of Citizen Kane or Charles Foster Kane and the characters in question. This is one of the great captivating qualities, is that every time we think, or every time I think I can read into this film a certain perspective, I watch it again and I realize maybe something else is going on here as well. That was completely off my radar when I first watched it, or when I watched it previously. And then I watch it again and I realize, my goodness, the reading I had before is nothing like the reading I'm having now, and I'm seeing the characters in a completely different way. And again, just like the various perspectives and vantage points, one of the great things about this film too, which brings it to this great state of being able to be rewatched and rewatched again, is this idea that it's constructed so finely and so minutely and so extravagantly, and yet at the same time so precisely, that one can look at it from one vantage point and then look at it again from a different vantage point. And that's true, for example, in the way we see characters. Sometimes we can see a character and we can see that character as very heroic and very progressive and very much one that we can sympathize and empathize with and we root for as viewers. But at the same time, that same character within the space of a same viewing, or maybe subsequent viewings, could be seen through our own eyes once again, not as a hero, but maybe as a villain, as someone who is having nefarious motivations, someone who is one that we don't want to root for. And that type of shifting feeling or quality is also at the source of how rewatchable this film is. And again, the various vantage points. This is also true in terms of how it's constructed and the prisms and the myriad sets of prisms that it essentially allows us, the viewers, to look through when we watch the film. And depending on how we are looking at it, depending on what prism we are looking through it, we see potentially something different every single time. I mean, for example, let's take the character of Kane, Orson Welles' Kane. We can see the character of Charles Foster Kane and the various sorts of, say, psychological motivations that we think he might have. And this might have something, or it might not, have something to do with the ultimate question that is at the heart of the plot of the film. What is Rosebud, right? But the more one thinks about it, the more one realizes, is that really what's going on? Or is something else indeed at the heart of what the motivation of this very grand and powerful and yet utterly mysterious character of Kane is? And indeed, is Rosebud what we think Rosebud is? Or is it indeed something completely what we weren't expecting? And I think that's also one of the great mysteries and joys of watching a film like this. And indeed, too, when we watch Kane, Charles Foster Kane, do we see him as a hero? Do we sympathize with him? Perhaps we do at certain points of the film. But then are there points where we turn and we look at him not as a hero, but perhaps as something less than a hero? Do we see him as a fallible hero? Or perhaps even worse, do we see him as an outright villain? And I think any reading is possible, even the various, say, gradations along the way. And so that is, I think, one of the great examples of how rich and how endlessly rewarding a watch of this and a rewatch of this film really is, Citizen Kane. And I should say, too, that the technical achievements, whether you're talking about the visuals or the sound, I didn't mention the idea of the mixture of, say, sound effects. There are some great tricks and techniques which I think are expanded upon with such brilliance by some of the commentaries, for example, about certain uses of sound that are almost invisible, but when one realizes what is going on, it is an incredible achievement to think, especially given the various, say, availability of certain sound equipment and the fact that it's able to take this cinematic experience and use sound and just catapult it into the stratosphere is so amazing. And it's doing so in this almost invisible, almost imperceptible way, which makes it even more brilliant. So that's yet another example. The visuals, the sound, the music as well, the great way in which the music seems to be many things at once. It has this ability to achieve the sense of the period a film. It has a sense of the horror film. It has a sense of the surreal, almost suspenseful film. And this is all thanks to the great music of that great legend who is Bernard Herrmann. And then we have to focus in on the greatness of the filmmaker Orson Welles, who seems to be at the center of everything when we were talking about this film, Citizen Kane, about this character, Charles Foster Kane. After all, he is both in front of the camera and behind the camera. Of course, when we get to various aspects of the production, in particular when we talk about the supplements and what it is they're talking about, and the explanation and the discussion and the history behind Orson Welles' life and career leading up to this monumental, momentous occasion that is Citizen Kane, with its release in 1941, I think we come to realize that the production history of this film is equally as complex, if not more so. And it becomes this labyrinth of a journey when one considers not just the build-up in the career and life and career of Orson Welles leading up to Citizen Kane, but what happened subsequent to Citizen Kane and the various points along his incredibly, incredibly captivating filmography, one of the most captivating artistic filmographies that has ever been created. And captured on celluloid, or as the case may be, examples of products that haven't been captured on celluloid. So that's another aspect of the wondrous and mysterious and fascinating career of Orson Welles. But in many ways, Citizen Kane is and will continue to be a key point, a key point, obviously, in the journey, the cinematic journey into the works and mind and life of one Orson Welles. And what we get here is, you don't need me to say it, and there have been many other people who have been able to say this and catalog this and express this much better than I could ever hope to do so in the span of this particular video discussion. But if we were to talk very briefly about Orson Welles and Citizen Kane, there is just this sense of almost this embedded identity, one equaling the other. Orson Welles seems to be, everything seems to be intersecting at once. This idea of the creativity that just was so evident from a very, very young age. And in terms of his work with theater and radio, of course, the now famous Mercury Theater, and his collaboration with many people in that particular sphere. John Houseman comes to mind as an example, but then we get to that trajectory of Orson Welles in Hollywood. And the point here is there is the freshness of the relationship between Orson Welles and Hollywood, just enough that Citizen Kane, on more or less his terms, was able to be made the way it was. Perhaps it would never be the same again. Maybe one side would no longer be trusting the other after this experience, thus leading to various specific aspects of Orson Welles' career subsequent to Citizen Kane. And those who know Welles know perhaps what I might be referring to. But in any event, this seems to be in many ways too a perfect storm of the collision and the collaboration between the Hollywood machine and all the toys in the sandbox that were made available to, on the one hand, to, on the other hand, on the other side of the coin, this creative force that is not just emerging, but is just exploding with this powerful, supreme vision that is captivating, that is truly a myriad thing, that is, as I say, smoke and mirrors, that is very much a story of America and Americana. It is a story of capitalism. It has this story of progressive, say, political views that also could be said to be, depending on one's viewpoint, it could be one side of the political spectrum, the other side of the political spectrum, and that's what makes it really fascinating as well. And that leads to yet the further mystery and mystery of mystery. The more mysteries that one thinks one has solved when one watches it, the more one realizes that there are indeed an exponential amount of mysteries and unanswered questions that await when one further explores and examines and watches and rewatches and rewatches and rewatches this extraordinary achievement. This is a film where the possibilities are endless. Truly, truly, the possibilities are endless when one is watching this, and that is one of the greatest things about this, which which is just again, its importance as a work of cinema. You don't need me to say it. Many people have said it before me, and many people will continue to say it after me. You don't need me to say how important this film is regarded in the context of cinema. Period. It is. It is. And one of the reasons that it is because it is, in many ways, a type of black hole. You go in, and the possibilities are endless and infinite. And that is something very rare. Very, very rare in cinema, very, very rare in art, very rare in any type of, say, any type of stimulus that is outside one's body, one's sense of self. But when one can discover it, one can find it. That is truly something to celebrate and to cherish and to champion. And I would dare say that perhaps that is one of the reasons why a film like this, like Orson Welles' Citizen Kane, has been championed and cherished for so long, and to the degree of intensity that it has, because it is truly a film of infinite, endless possibility. This is the work from 1941, and it is Citizen Kane. The Criterion Collection has, during this year of 2021, released this film, Citizen Kane, on this new physical media release in the physical media catalog of Criterion, again at spine number 1104. And this happens to be the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition, and it is a multi-disc edition, and we will get to the reasons for that momentarily. And I think before we get anywhere further, we should talk about the restoration of the presentation. And it says, for example, in the booklet, which is part of the release here, it says Citizen Kane is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.37 to 1. And to continue further, we have, let's see, on the 4K Ultra HD disc, the feature is presented in Dolby Vision HDR. On the Blu-ray, it is presented in high definition SDR, etc. For restoration of the original monaural soundtrack, the bilateral viable area optical tracks from both the nitrate fine-grain master and the duplicate negative were transferred at certain services that are mentioned here. And so we have descriptions here about the visual presentation and also the sound presentation here. Now we should focus in on one aspect too, which is, as of now, December 2021, which is the time of making of this video, we have this particular release from Criterion, but the fine team at this wonderful site, which is dvdbeaver.com, I understand they were able to identify and indeed discuss what is now considered to be a defect in the Blu-ray presentation of Citizen Kane. And so I watched the 4K UHD disc of the film, and then I watched the Blu-ray disc of this film, and I indeed noticed that around the 30-minute mark or so for the Blu-ray, there is a scene involving the character played by Everett Sloane, Mr. Bernstein, and it's a scene involving William Allen's character talking to him, or indeed we are listening to his reminiscence and his stories and his comments. And there's a moment where it seems like the image or the say contrast or just the general visual palette becomes a little bit flatter and a little bit more bland. And I think that is, and it becomes quite noticeable, and especially if one compares it to the 4K UHD presentation. The Blu-ray presentation at this particular moment onwards does have that bland visual quality to it, and I think this has been acknowledged by the team at Criterion to be indeed an unintentional defect. And so as of this video, I understand that there will be a replacement program, if it hasn't already begun, for the Blu-ray discs. And so that is the situation as far as that's concerned. That's my understanding. And I think Criterion has acknowledged this as such. So well done for being able to catch that. And I also should say too that I do know that this kind of situation maybe engendered a lot of critiques against the Criterion Collection. You know, how could they do this to a film like this? It's a very important release, etc. And I totally get that type of criticism. I mean, at the same time, though, mistakes happen. And you know, I mean, I don't work at Criterion, and I don't work in a job involving DVD or Blu-ray or 4K UHD releases, and nothing of the sort. But I do have a job, and I must say that whenever I work, I try my best to not make mistakes. But I make mistakes as well. So um, it's one thing also to make mistakes. It's also something else to acknowledge them. And I think it's oftentimes very difficult to acknowledge when one has made a mistake. But when Criterion did that, I think that was a really good step. I mean, they're taking the step of having the replacement program, and I understand it's replacing the Blu-ray disc at no extra charge, at least for people who are living in North America. I'm not sure for people like myself who are living abroad are concerned. Well, we'll think about that later, you know, shipping charge, etc. But the point being that for the most part, there will be this replacement program, more or less free of charge, I think. And so I think that is, and it's going to be burdened or shouldered by Criterion. And so my point here is that I think for me and from my perspective, it would have been much more of a controversy had Criterion not acknowledged this particular defect or error, if they just let it be and just uh, regarded it in the public sphere as being, you know, this is what we intended, that would have been much more of a controversy. The fact that they've acknowledged as such and they're trying their best to fix it, I think is, I mean, it's a great example of what they're trying to do. And as I say, the fact that they made this particular policy based upon the fine observations of third-party reviewers, DVD Beaver, etc. I think, and they acknowledge this. I think it's, first of all, great for the people who spotted this, and also we should acknowledge that, as I say, it would have been much more of a controversy for me had Criterion not done something. But the fact that they're doing something, I think, is enough for me anyway. And we'll see what happens when that replacement disc occurs. Right now, I should say that as of now, it is the quote-unquote defective Blu-ray disc that I have as part of this presentation. So maybe going forward now, let me just share my views on how I felt when I saw not the Blu-ray presentation, but the 4K UHD presentation of Citizen Kane. So I should say too that you know, I have seen this film a number of times, many times, more times than I can count, and ever since I was very young. And this is, of course, because for a lot of reasons, but one of those reasons is that this film is often regarded among critical spheres and also among academic circles, film studies, etc., as well as critics lists and the like. This is often regarded as being the greatest film ever made. And so with that type of reputation, one I was very curious at a very young age what it was, what it is. And so I'd seen this film many times, whether it be playing on TV and I had the opportunity to see it there, or watching on VHS growing up, watching it in class when I was taking film studies classes, then later on with various, say, experiences with physical media releases. Incidentally, I should point out that we had a number of great physical media releases of Citizen Kane in the past years. For example, we have this, which is the 70th anniversary superset of Citizen Kane, and this actually is very relevant when we're talking about a number of the features, etc., that now are present in the new current Criterion release. But that's one example. Speaking of past Criterion releases too, we should point out something that has been part of the Criterion marketing, at least from a certain perspective anyway, in regard to Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane has the distinction of being regarded as, or it's considered the first official Laserdisc release under the title or under the banner of the Criterion Collection, way back in the day in the early to mid 1980s. And here's that particular first release of Citizen Kane on Laserdisc. It has been released in a number of other versions over the years. For instance, we have something like this here, or we have another release which occurred later in the Laserdisc catalog at spine number 142. We have the CAV and CLV editions accordingly. We have this version right here in the same CAD edition, which is right here, which has this wonderful presentation, like so. And I should say that this particular second release in the Criterion Collection Laserdisc catalog has a lot of connection with the current new release from Criterion in this 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo release in 2020. My point is that it's, of course, a film that has been available steadily and through a number of various sources, including the Criterion Collection Laserdisc era. But of course, it has never been made available within the current DVD, Blu-ray, and now 4K UHD physical media catalog from Criterion until today. And so in that way, it has been marketed as being a return of the title to the collection, as it were. The first ever Criterion Laserdisc title is now back in the collection. And I think that is a really interesting angle to take it as far as the marketing is concerned. After all, Citizen Kane is, as I say, considered a very important film for a number of reasons, and also in terms of Criterion's history, it is considered something that's very close to that history. You've seen a number of other titles, including this year, that were prior Criterion Laserdisc titles that have now re-emerged into the collection, and this is one of another one of those great examples. In that way, from a physical media perspective, this new release from Criterion is very, very, very interesting indeed. And now let me return very quickly to how I felt when I was watching the 4K UHD presentation of this particular release. And so with all that background, I was watching, or I put the disc into the player, the 4K player in the other room, with great anticipation as to what it might hold in terms of the visual feats and the sounds, etc. I must say, too, before I go any further, that I wouldn't call myself an expert when it comes to Citizen Kane. I don't know. I don't know. I would say I don't know 1/10 of 0.000001% of the other experts in Citizen. I'm not at all an expert when it comes to the world of Citizen Kane. So even though I might have seen it a number of times, I am not an expert. So I don't know what to see, or I don't know what to spot exactly whenever I put in, say, a quote-unquote new release version of Citizen Kane. I watch it as someone who has enjoyed the film over the years, but again, I'm no way an expert when it comes to Citizen Kane. So with that type of caveat, I put the disc in, and I must say that it felt, on the one hand, very, very familiar. In this, I mean very positively. The presentation feels very familiar in that it is a film that always, for me, is immersive. It's one that you just jump into it. It just grabs you with its quick opening montage that has a lot of different tones and different sense of mystery, and also a sense of comedy and deftness of timing. News on the March, etc., which is contrasted so beautifully with the opening of Xanadu and the final living, breathing moments of Citizen Kane, or I'm sorry, Charles Foster Kane, that opens the film. So this type of swirl of energy, of different tones of energy, really grabs me when I first watch it. So that's an example of how this film has always been a type of immersive film. But there's something really acute and kind of incredible in terms of my experience of watching the 4K UHD release of this. I felt like it was immersive in that familiar way, but at the same time, I felt somehow like it just felt even, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know if it was a deeper immersive experience. I wouldn't quite describe it that way, but it felt like maybe a different dimension of an immersive experience. Let me put it that way. And in that way, I felt too that I was seeing things that I had up to now never thought or never considered upon a viewing of Citizen Kane. And this could also be in terms of the way in which the contrast, the lines between lightness and darkness, between various, say, shades of shadow, those contrasts seem to be very, I wouldn't say overly pronounced, but they seem to be more noticeable when I was watching this 4K UHD presentation. Here's an example. This type of pronouncement means that there is a distinction that my eye can catch in terms of, say, this shade of gray and, say, a lighter or darker shade of gray. And that pronouncement actually makes the black and white photography much more of a, let's say, an interactive experience for me when I watched this particular. Not that it wasn't before, but it's just something that I noticed with more pronouncement this time around. And upon my noticing of it, I felt, or I was thinking for the first time, and again, I'm not an expert in KANE, so the fact that this came to me recently maybe is also a testament to the fact that I didn't catch it earlier, perhaps. But what the 4K UHD presentation did for me was it made me notice these contrasts, because I felt they were very pronounced in this beautiful way, the things that I didn't notice in prior versions. And that pronouncement made me realize that I could read this film, Citizen Kane, also as a type of film noir thriller, or even a film noir kind of horror film. And because of the way that darkness and shadow are really enveloping certain scenes, and the way that certain differences can really make distinctions in terms of various shades of gray. And when those distinctions can be made, one can realize just the various gradations of morality that are at play with the various characters, especially the main character of Charles Foster Kane. And indeed, the other characters, Mr. Bernstein, for example, I think there's something very mysterious about him. His seemingly a positive character, but perhaps there is something a little bit more nefarious that's going on with a character like him. And I think that is an example of the nuanced moral ambiguity of a film like Kane, which is very much akin to the moral ambiguity playground of the best of film noir. And so this experience, in this interesting way, yet again helped me to look at the film through yet another Xanadu vantage point. And so maybe I don't know if it's specifically to do with the fact that I'm seeing it again, or maybe it has to do with the 4K UHD presentation specifically. My hunch is that it's the latter. In any event, that is an example of how this new presentation enabled me to see the film from a vantage point that I had up to now not considered with any type of directness. So I have only seen it just a limited number of times, so I have to experience this new 4K UHD presentation more to get a sense of how I will further interact with the film going forward. And of course, I won't throw away any of the other releases. I will still hold on to the other releases, because I think there's a great value in, again, looking at the film through various perspectives, not just necessarily through one perspective or one presentation, but through a whole possibility of perspectives, whether they be even older prior releases or other releases that are non-Criterion. So my point here is that for me personally, I'm so happy to be able to have this and to be able to watch it. And so, but I wouldn't necessarily call it the only copy of Citizen Kane that you should go out and buy immediately. It is, just like the film itself, an issue and question of the endless myriad possibilities. And that is certainly the case for the actual mode and the method by which one watches it. And that means the presentation, that means the various releases. So you can go and get this as being a release, and like me, you might feel like this release opened the doors for yet another possible interpretation. That is certainly the case for me. And in that way, I'm very happy that it's here, and I'm very, very impressed. But at the same time, I do acknowledge that there are many possibilities of release out there for Citizen Kane. This may be for you, this may not be for you, again, depending on where you are and where you sit between yourself as the adventurer on your own cinematic journey and this word Citizen Kane. But I should say that, again, from my own subjective experience, from my personal experience, this is incredibly impressive. Very, very impressive, the 4K UHD presentation. I am so happy it's here. And again, I am looking forward immensely to watching this film over and over again through this and through other means, of course, but through this included, in order to see if I can find yet further possibilities in this endless cycle, this endless hallway this hallway of mirrors, much like the hallway of mirrors that forms one of the key scenes in this film, a hallway of mirrors where something is potentially new at every corner. So the 4K UHD presentation is yet another landmark stop along the way in that journey that will continue and continue and continue, hopefully for many, many, many years to come. So this is a very important thing for me, and I'm very, very happy that it's here. When the Blu-ray gets replaced, I don't know when it will be, but hopefully very soon in the coming new year, when the Blu-ray gets replaced, maybe I will examine that too and see how I feel about that. But in the meantime, we have this wonderful release from Criterion. So let us now focus our attention on what the extras are, the supplements are, with regard to this recent release made by the Criterion Collection. Now, there will be so many supplements that we will talk about momentarily over the course of not one, but actually 2 discs. Again, I'll talk about that momentarily. But before I get to the supplements menus themselves, let us first focus in on the audio commentary track options that are made available as part of this package. Now, as I indicated, this film is being presented in one of 2 physical media options or choices, 4K UHD or the Blu-ray. And so on each, you have the option of listening to one of 3 possible audio commentary tracks. And so those 3 commentary tracks, just for your information, are the first one is described as being from 2021. This is James Naramore and Jonathan Rosenbaum. And the second is from 2002, and this is with Roger Ebert. And the third is also from 2002, and this is with Peter Bogdanovich. And so my understanding is that the Roger Ebert commentary and the Peter Bogdanovich commentary are indeed the same commentary tracks that were made available through other prior releases of the film on physical media. But to have them here for purposes of this new Criterion release, I think is outstanding. Let me focus in on those 2002 commentary tracks first. Each in its own way, I think, brings so much to the table, so rich and so rewarding and so fascinating. Let's talk about Peter Bogdanovich's classic commentary first. He comes at it from the viewpoint, and he describes it as being how he came to know Orson Welles in terms of his own admiration of Welles's work and Citizen Kane, and also getting to know Welles and getting to become associated with him in terms of discussions and interviews and the like. And then thus, this also leads into Peter Bogdanovich's discussion of the film itself and his reading of certain aspects of the film, how things are perhaps not as one might think they are. And he brings in a lot of insight into what was told to him directly in terms of, say, the literal significance or the MacGuffin-like quality, or a little bit of both, or a hybrid of both, with regard to, say, the Rosebud aspect, or other aspects of the cinematography and style and sound and the visual images that are also tied closely to Welles in terms of his own storytelling, his own life leading up to, or his career leading up to Citizen Kane and beyond. So, and it's all done in that wonderful Peter Bogdanovich presentation and style, which is it's great. It's absolutely great. And so the fact that it's here after having been released elsewhere, the fact that it's still here is wonderful. Now, maybe those who already know the past Citizen Kane releases, you'll have heard that Peter Bogdanovich commentary already. If so, here's another opportunity to listen to it again. If not, here's your opportunity to listen to it for the first time. So please, please check it out if you can, the Peter Bogdanovich commentary track from 2002. But then let's turn to the other 2002 commentary track, which is made available now, and that from Roger Ebert. I must say that this is, for me, one of the great commentary tracks that I've ever listened to. I love this commentary track so much when I first heard it, however many years ago when I first heard it on this particular release, and I still love it to this day. Roger Ebert is someone that I really admire. I mean, his work was so important to me growing up. And so I think a lot of my admiration for this particular commentary track, I think, has to do with how much I admire Roger Ebert as a film critic and reviewer, and someone who analyzes cinema in a way that is very passionate and very deep, and also very easy to follow and understand. He presents it in such a way that it makes the reach of his words very universally accessible. That's one of the great beauties and one of the great strengths of Roger Ebert's touch. He has a real warmth of touch when he handles film criticism and film reviewing and scholarship. And that's certainly the case for his treatment of Citizen Kane in this commentary track. It is one of the best commentary tracks. Truly is. He goes into so much detail. It's packed filled with information. You can tell with every word that he speaks that he loves this film. I mean, that's true for everyone who's speaking about it, right? Don't get me wrong. It's definitely true for everyone who's involved in every aspect of any of the supplements and commentary tracks. But there's just something of this pull that I feel when I listen to the words and the voice of the great Roger Ebert for me. As I say, he was so important to me growing up. And he still is very important to me in terms of his legacy and his writings and his past criticism review show recordings and his commentary tracks, just like this one. This is one of the best. And you just, as I say, he has this way of explaining things with so much detail and passion, and that is also so easy to follow and so accessible. It's wonderful. What a great teacher and what a great commentary track this is. So I'm so happy this is being included again in this Criterion release. So once again, like with the other commentary track, if you listened to it before in past releases, that's great. If not, this is your chance to listen to it for the first time, and it's really wonderful. So that's the Roger Ebert commentary track from 2002. And then coming to the newer commentary track from 2021, the James Naramore and Jonathan Rosenbaum combination, this great duo, the dynamic duo, if you will, of Welles scholarship and examination. Here they are again, and this is again what I love about these three commentary tracks is each in its own way seems to be focusing in on, again, the same subject matter, Citizen Kane and Orson Welles, but focusing in on yet other aspects that make for, I think, enriching experiences with each commentary track, respectively. That's definitely the case for this 2021 commentary track, because these gentlemen talk about so many things. For instance, the important parallels with the fictional character of Charles Foster Kane and the real-life character of William Randolph Hearst. There are similarities and also differences. It's often the case that Citizen Kane, as a film and a story, is often regarded or often described as being a story that is based upon the life of William Randolph Hearst. And that is indeed the case to a certain degree. But Naramore and Rosenbaum also make the point specifically about how there are deviations from the life of William Randolph Hearst. And indeed, this will be talked about a little bit elsewhere in some of the other supplements, especially with the comments of the great Farron Smith-Nemi, which we'll again speak to when we get to that particular discussion in the supplement section. But here in the commentary track, this point is also brought up. Another example being Charles Foster Kane was born into a life of modest, almost poverty, whereas William Randolph Hearst, we understand from his biography that he was born into a very wealthy means indeed. And so, but there are also very strong similarities that I think are touched upon. And of course, like with other commentary tracks, they make the great examination and observational points about the technical accomplishments of particular scenes that occur as they're watching it. Also, what's so wonderful is that they acknowledge specific aspects about how this film is similar to and also different from and distinct from other films in the Welles canon. They make mention of, for example, Mr. Arkadin and the use of makeup here and versus the use of makeup here in Citizen Kane, etc. And also they make great points of discussion and an even robust, friendly debate as to where this film sits in various perspectives. For example, is this film a Hollywood film? or is this film an independent film? And that is, I think, that's something that I was trying to refer to earlier when I was describing Citizen Kane. I'm sorry, when I was describing Citizen Kane and Orson Welles and Hollywood, the Hollywood machine. It's almost like a perfect storm. It would never be like this ever again, as we know in subsequent years with Welles's history and the history of Hollywood and Welles. But here we have a type of perfect storm. They didn't quite, the one side didn't quite know each other, the other side quite yet. And that not knowing each other was just enough to be able to make certain concessions along the way, or to make certain concessions maybe one-sidedly towards Wells' directions, let's put it that way. But in any event, the debate is brought up here between Naramore and Rosenbaum as to whether this could be considered to be a Hollywood film or an independent film. And that is a fascinating distinction because it goes also at the heart of Welles's own filmmaking career and style, and just how important and how significant Kane is in that context. So this is a very important, robust discussion that's happening. Also, another really interesting robust discussion that seems to be happening in real time, which is one of the great hallmarks of this collaboration between these two gentlemen, here and in other Welles's works, commentary tracks, as we know, but here in particular, once again, is how they're having a real life debate and discussion about perhaps the politics of Citizen Kane. And is this something that can be seen from a certain, say, side of the political spectrum? In particular, they're speaking about in the context of, say, the U.S. political spectrum. Is it what is it? What's the phrases that they are used? Is it left leaning or is it right leaning? And so they make the case that it could be either or. I think they make the case for one side by using or basing their discussion, I think quite reasonably so, on what they understood to be Welles's own personal politics at the time, especially, say, other projects that the Mercury Theater had been involved in leading up to Citizen Kane in the 1930s and into 1941. And so that's one aspect that they talk about in terms of one approach to the politics of Citizen Kane. And yet at the same time, they acknowledge that, much like we've discussed before about how Kane can be seen through various angles and perspectives, even perspectives from the opposite side of the political spectrum can view Kane in this very positive and very reaffirming way. And they too acknowledge this. So this is, I think, another great example of the myriad distinctions and prisms that can be used in order to view Kane. And that is true for the politics of Kane itself. And this is a great example and the great robust discussion that the two of them are having, friendly, lively discussion and debate. And they mention other things too. Again, so much. Please listen to the commentary track. They of course say it much better than I can ever hope to try to explain and describe it in my very terrible way of talking here. But I just want to say once again just how great it is. They speak too about other things, other aspects. They talk at one point about the battle over Citizen Kane, Pauline Kael, and there's a bit of, quite a bit actually, of controversy in terms of the what was perceived to be the way in which emphasis seemed to be maybe inappropriately placed upon the authorship issue of Citizen Kane, and that brings into the discussion the contributions of other people, in particular in terms of the authorship question, Herman Mankiewicz. And so while there's great acknowledgement of the input of Herman Mankiewicz on the one hand, there's also, they touch upon in this commentary track and elsewhere, they touch upon in this commentary track the almost the controversial point of the discussion of the authorship over over Citizen Kane, and how some might have been regarded as been seen to try to take the authorship away from Orson Welles and try to place it elsewhere. And I think there's also great discussion as to the appropriateness or inappropriateness of that type of calibration of the authorship question or issue. And they also talk about, well, I mean, they talk about many other things as well. I mean, they talk about the greatness of contribution of Greg Toland. I mean, Greg Toland is, there's a wonderful way in which Greg Toland's name appears in the credits of Citizen Kane, the closing credits of Citizen Kane. You have the credits, the cast list and the credits of the crew. There's this wonderful placement of Greg Toland's name in a particular important credit. And this is acknowledged here and elsewhere. And this is a type of acknowledgement or understanding just how much respect Welles had for Greg Toland. Also, it's acknowledged just how much respect Toland had for Welles. And when you think about the relationship between the two, Toland being at the time this master, this expert extraordinaire into the art of photography and cinema, and Welles, to his own self-acknowledgement, knew relatively little, if anything, about cinema and photography. And so he had to learn from Greg Toland. And there were some moments where Welles himself and also other people acknowledged about how Welles maybe unintentionally stepped on some of the toes of the more seasoned veteran experts, as it were. But Greg Toland took it all very well. And there was a really productive relationship between the two of them, such that I think one cannot emphasize enough the importance of Greg Toland's work here. And I think the fact that the comments are made here and elsewhere about the placement of Greg Toland's name in the credits, I think is a testament to the fact that everyone acknowledges, rightly so, how significant Toland's contribution is, and truly is. It's out of this world important, super important. So for these and other reasons, this commentary track is yet another great option to go to. So I encourage you to listen to one of these commentary tracks, or all of them if you get the chance, as you make your way through your own cinematic journey with this film, Citizen Kane, excuse me. So in any event, the Criterion Collection has made available two prior existing commentary tracks and the third, the new one from 2021. So 3 in total, and they're all great in their own way. So please check it out, check them out if you can. And now let us focus in on the supplements which can be found with respect to this particular release, Citizen Kane. Now, it has a lot to do with the number of discs, and the release itself has many discs, and I'll talk about the packaging a little bit later in this video, but just note that Criterion here houses 4 discs total, and the first is the 4K UHK disc, and then the other 3 compartments being for the 3 Blu-ray discs. So we have 3 Blu-ray discs, so it's a lot. Now I should point out too that the supplements themselves, the video-based supplements, will be found on the Blu-ray discs. And so we're going to focus in on Blu-ray disc number 2 and Blu-ray disc number 3. So it corresponds to, if you count the 4K UHD disc being the first disc, discs 3 and 4, or in the Blu-ray category of the discs, Blu-ray disc number 2 and Blu-ray disc number 3. So in any event, we have many discs worth of supplements, and so let us focus on what those are, in addition to the commentary tracks which we have discussed just previously. So on the first of the Blu-ray supplements disc, let's call it that, we have a number of supplements. And what are they? So first we have a documentary which is described as being from October 1991, a BBC documentary, approximately 1 hour and 35 minutes, which is called The Complete Citizen Kane. And so this is really wonderful to have. It is a complete 1 hour 35 minutes, so it's a feature-length documentary in a manner of speaking. And here we have a very, I think, comprehensive overview as to the various participants in the film, various experts in the film, contemporary experts, etc., as well as participants who are being interviewed or who are talking about the events and production history details leading up to and surrounding, of course, the making of this grand epic entertainment, Citizen Kane. And so we have a number of elements and a number of people that are speaking. So, for example, we have build-up and a little bit of description about Welles's career leading up to Citizen Kane, in particular some focus on his radio work, as well as the Mercury Theater, as well as some of his hopes and ambitions and initial plans in terms of his first foray or first challenge with respect to making a film. And so a lot of details in this conversation emerge. For example, the War of the Worlds broadcast, which is very famous or very infamous, depending on one's perspective. But it was, as we understand too, one of the very significant events of Welles's career and life, one of the very significant episodes that perhaps went towards the decision to have Welles participate in the Hollywood filmmaking process that eventually led to Citizen Kane and RKO, etc. So that's a very important point, or historical event, in a manner of speaking, that's touched upon. Also, there are the plans of Heart of Darkness, and we'll talk a little bit about Heart of Darkness a little bit later in the supplements section as well. There's also the discussion about Greg Toland and the importance of Greg Toland in the context of Citizen Kane, of course. Also, the working relationship between Greg Toland and Orson Welles. Orson Welles, as we are reminded of, was a very brilliant creative mind, but as far as a technician is concerned and his experience in Hollywood is concerned, he was still, relatively speaking, a novice who was still at the same time very eager to learn as much as possible. And one of those sources of education, as it were, was through his working relationship with Greg Toland. So this is a very important aspect in and of itself. And then we have other people, other experts, other participants talking, or we get references to Ruth Warwick, Robert Wise, Robert Carringer. There's also some discussion about planned scenes or deleted scenes or storyboards or descriptions of such scenes. There's also the idea that's referred to with respect to Pauline Kael and her perspective on Citizen Kane. She has written, of course, very famously about this, but this also leads into some notion or reference which was referred to earlier, for instance, in the Rosenbaum-Narum or commentary track, about what might be referred to as the screenplay controversy, namely touching upon the note of authorship issues when it comes to Citizen Kane, or what has been brought up in the conversation, let me put it that way, with respect to the authorship issue in the context of the screenplay construction, again, Mankiewicz and Welles. And of course, we also have other aspects of Welles's life and career. John Houseman is mentioned. And also we have, I mentioned earlier about certain scenes that were planned but never maybe incorporated into the final film product, but we do have descriptions of those in case you are interested. So this overall, I think, very comprehensive, very robust, and in many ways a wonderful type of introduction or primer, as well as a lovely reminder or a lovely maybe jumping off point into further explorations into the world of Citizen Kane. So wherever you find yourself, if you are being introduced to the world of Citizen Kane for the first time, this is a great place to go as far as introductory information is concerned. If you are well versed into the world of Kane, this documentary still provides so much in terms of jumping off points, details, and other bits of information, trivia, and background detail that I think will make anyone continually fascinated with the work of Orson Welles, the life and times of Orson Welles, again, surrounding or otherwise within the context of Citizen Kane, So this is the first of the supplements that can be found on the supplements disc. Continuing forward, we have Working on Kane. This is approximately 18 minutes, and this is a sort of collection of one-on-one interviews with Robert Wise, Ruth Warwick, and Linwood Dunn. And so we have, for instance, Robert Wise and his relationship with Welles and the creative process in terms of the editing, Linwood Dunn in terms of the maybe technical aspects of the optical related technical aspects, the optical printer is referred to, etc. And then also Ruth Warwick, who plays one of the significant roles in the film in terms of the relationship between her character and Charles Foster Kane. So this all totals approximately 18 minutes, and it's a really fascinating set of interviews. I should point out, just in case anyone is interested, I mentioned earlier that the Criterion Collection did release in its Laserdisc era this particular second edition, as it were, of Citizen Kane, which is at spine number 142. And this was released, this particular Laserdisc was released, according to the back here, in 1991. So this corresponded, or the intention was that it would correspond to the 50th anniversary of the film and its initial release, it being released in 1941, this being released in 1991, excuse me, so 1991, so 50 years after the initial release. And so what we had in this great release from Criterion, right, which is among the supplements, we had actually this huge supplement, which was a collection of many interviews. And these interviews were divided into these various groups. And among those groups of interviews, we had the interviews with Linwood Dunn, Ruth Warrick, and Robert Wise. And so the way that the Laserdisc worked was that you had 3 interviews or so going on at the same time within the same space, and you could actually just click on the audio button and you could change from one audio to another audio to another audio. So as all of the interviews are going on at once, you could press the audio button to select which particular interview you wanted to listen to. So this is an interesting use of space and compression, as well as a very interesting interactive type of format that was existent in the Laserdisc days in the hands of Criterion. Here for the Blu-ray, I understand that we are dealing with the interviews, but this time they aren't connected in the same multi-screen format like we saw in the earlier Laserdisc, but rather we have them sort of edited in a format which I think is maybe more customary for today's supplemental editing style. So one after the other, that sort of thing. I should point out, too, that the actual interview footage that we get is different. It's a little bit different. We get some comments or some interview footage in the Laserdisc that we don't get in the Blu-ray disc version, and vice versa. So if you are interested and if you are curious, now I'm not sure if this particular Laserdisc supplement, which has so many interviews like this, not just with the participants of the or the interviewees that we have included in the Blu-ray disc supplements, but we have so many others that aren't at all included in this Blu-ray disc. So if you are interested and if you have a Laserdisc player, I would suggest checking this out. I'm not sure if this particular supplement of this Laserdisc is available through other means, but in case you're interested. But with that being said, though, we do get the echo or the certain remarks that were expressed by these 3 individuals working on Kane, that I think are so worth it and so essential and so valuable. So bravo for Criterion, or bravo to Criterion, excuse me, for including these interviews or excerpts from these interviews in this form. Again, approximately 18 minutes. And then the third supplement on this disc is called On Toland, and this is approximately 15 minutes. Again, similarly, like with the past supplement, we had a series of interviews in this multi-screen format that you could select by pressing the audio button in the context of the Laserdisc supplement. And here for the Blu-ray, we have the assembly of similarly themed interviews that are assembled in this 15-minute running supplement, which is called On Toland. We have the 3 interviewees being Alan Davio and Haskell Wexler and Vilmos Sigmund. And here they are speaking about their experiences with the film Citizen Kane and overall impressions of the work Citizen Kane, as well as their impressions and views and perspectives on the work of Greg Toland, director of photography. So, and how they came to appreciate various aspects of the photography and then the work overall. So as I say, this is also taken from the series of interviews from the same people that could be found in one of the sections of the supplement on the legacy of Citizen Kane. We're not getting all of the same footage. We're getting some overlap, but not all overlap. And so, again, if you're interested, please check out the Laserdisc for some interesting insight. But at the same time, I should say that the Blu-ray assembly of this particular series of 3 interviews is really excellent. So this is the supplement, again, 15 minutes, which is On Toland. And then continuing on, we have what's described as a new supplement from 2021, and this is with Craig Barron and Ben Burt, approximately 27 minutes. And here they are each talking about the film from a technical aspect based on their own expertise. Craig Barron from a maybe visual and special effects perspective, and then Ben Burt from a sound perspective. And so it's very reminiscent of a similar type of supplement that we found from the two of them, for instance, for a previous Criterion release. But here we have them talking again about their appreciation for the craft of Citizen Kane from these two vantage points respectively. So here there's reference to, say, the optical printer, how RKO at the time was maybe considered very much ahead of the game in terms of its use and application of technical advancements, at least in the context of the other Hollywood studios at the time. There's also speaking of Linwood Dunn, there's Greg Tolan mentioned. And also in terms of sound, Ben Burt makes a really astute comment and observation about how it very much is, it's almost like there is the theory or the style of a radio play at work when one is hearing the sounds and the dialogue of Citizen Kane. So I thought it was a really interesting comment. And also the idea of when sound is used, also when sound is not used. For example, he also cites one of the really interesting areas where sound is not used, namely the opening titles, which is in many ways a very shocking thing because one would be accustomed, especially with films from the early 40s, to have opening titles with some kind of sound or music overlay, but not Citizen Kane. It is silent, and that has a certain boldness or shock value to it, in a manner of speaking. And also the idea of the way that the storytelling form seems to be changed here. And this is due to sound and visual elements, the idea of what's often referred to as deep focus, or the use of the three-dimensional space within the frame, and how to make the frame filled with so much stuff such that at the same time trying to signal to the audience what it is that the audience should be focusing on, or maybe it's up to the audience as to what that audience member chooses, what he or she decides to focus on. And also the idea of the split screen process is mentioned, also backgrounds, use of backgrounds is mentioned, the use of echoes is also mentioned, and tricks, again, both visually and in terms of the audio. So overall, this is a very insightful and, again, wonderfully presented supplement from a type of contemporary viewpoint from two experts in the field, talking about their appreciation of this work, Citizen Kane. So please check this out if you can, approximately 27 minutes. And that's not all, because then we get a video essay from Robert Carringer, approximately 13 minutes, Rosebud Reconsidered. And so Robert Carringer is a very famous expert when it comes to Orson Welles and Citizen Kane. So much work, so much scholarship, including, I might add, some scholarship and work that was included in past Criterion Laserdisc releases. And so what we're getting now is we're not getting what we got in the earlier Laserdisc releases, which are right here. These were Laserdisc release versions that had what were known as video essays, which are like, what do you call it, like... you press the button forward and it's you have slideshow presentations, and you press the button forward and you have a list of text or stills of text and essay slides edited together with say pictures or stills or other type of snapshots, etc., and that formed the overall the type of essay that was included. Here we have a more maybe modern realized video essay in the style of the contemporary supplements of the time, including Criterion in past releases and of course in this one, Citizen Kane. And so here we have yet another focus on Welles leading up to his early 20s. He was considered a type of child prodigy, excuse me. And so very brilliant, very gifted, very talented, and that led to his involvement, or his giving the opportunity to work in Hollywood and create this work known as Citizen Kane. Also the idea of the links between Kane and also William Randolph Hearst. And other points are mentioned. Storyboard artwork is mentioned. The Mercury Theater is mentioned. The idea of Rosebud, what there might be, I don't know, various meanings as to what Rosebud could signify. And so this is also something that maybe is a little bit of a inside joke, as it were, that could or could not, depending on your viewpoint, could be the case as far as what Rosebud actually means. The myth of Sisyphus is mentioned, and also the idea of the sled, what happened to the sled, the actual sled that was used. So that's an interesting anecdote that maybe closes off the essay, as well as the consideration of Kane, Citizen Kane, throughout the years, and it's the way that it is essentially catapulted into the sort of the hearts and minds of the cinema goers, audiences, and critics who have regarded this film generally as being the greatest film ever made. And so this growth led into the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and so forth. So anyway, this is a really comprehensive, wonderful essay from one of the great premier experts of Wells and Kane scholarship, and that's Robert Carringer. So please check this out if you can, approximately 13 minutes. And that's not all, because then we get another contemporary supplement, again described as being from 2021, approximately 23 minutes. And this is a discussion with Farron Smith-Nemi. Now, it's a wonderful discussion. Here she is focusing in on the connections or the similarities and differences between Kane and William Randolph Hearst. And so here we have a really detailed, almost biographical account or summary of William Randolph Hearst and various aspects of Hearst's life and relationships that could be said to be forming the foundational aspects or inspiration for a lot of the story elements of Citizen, and the character elements, of Citizen Kane. So a lot of things mentioned here, and as far as Hearst's wealth, his family wealth, his rise of power in terms of the newspaper media, his attempts at seeking higher office or public office, as it were, his various relationships, his use of the media as the news of Kane and Orson Welles began to emerge, and the connections began to become very apparent as to the fact that Welles was making a film that was inspired perhaps quite heavily by the life and times of William Randolph Hearst, and seeing how his power as a type of media mogul could still be exercised even during the contemporary times of Citizen Kane's release. And so this is all part of the myth and mythology of Citizen Kane and Orson Welles, and also it has perhaps something to do with the types of, say, immediate success or lack thereof, using air quotes, in terms of Welles's career subsequent, in terms of the release of Kane subsequent. We should point out that maybe the rise to prominence of the critical acclaim of Citizen Kane really came a little bit later, after its initial release, maybe around the 1950s or so, and it probably came quite intensely and quite prominently overseas. And so this is a very interesting potential link between the power of Hearst and the way in which he was able to, in essence, block certain routes or avenues of Kane's initial release in the early 1940s. But this is yet one of many details that Farron Smith-Nemi talks about in terms of the relationship, the similarities and differences, the overall, say, myth of the connection between Citizen Kane and William Randolph Hearst, the life and times thereof. So this is another essential type of backstory that I think more knowledge about really enriches one's viewing of Citizen Kane and also Orson Welles' career writ large. So bravo to Criterion, and bravo to Farron Smith-Nemi for providing this commentary and these comments within this wonderful supplement. So please check it out if you can. And that's not all, because then we get another 2021 Criterion supplement. This is a one-on-one interview with professor and film scholar and expert Raquel J. Gates. So Professor Gates is talking about reframing Kane. It's approximately 15 minutes. And here she is speaking about the maybe modern viewpoint on Citizen Kane. She does make reference to the point that it is generally regarded as being the greatest film ever made. But what does that mean in terms of how maybe the younger generations, how young and emerging film students in her classes, for example, how people are watching Kane, how people are regarding Kane. Do they see it? Do they accept the critical assessment as it has been described as being the greatest film ever made, or do they have reservations or criticism about it? And how does she, as a professor of film and a teacher of this particular film itself, how does she discuss these particular matters with her students who are, say, watching the film for the first time? So these are really fascinating, open-ended questions that I think could apply to essentially anyone, because after all, we are watching, at some point in all of our lives, we saw Citizen Kane for the first time, right? And what were your feelings? What were the feelings that you had when you saw Citizen Kane? I certainly can say that I had certain reservations when I first saw Kane, but then I began to see the film from different perspectives as I was growing up, and as I took classes and I was reading a little bit more about it, and as I was watching more, say, releases, including this current Criterion release, etc. But it's an interesting question as to how people react to it initially, and I think her response, or her solution, in a manner of speaking, is a really apropos one, which is that she tries to focus not on, say, the hype of the film per se, but rather on the universal appeal points and the points of accessibility, like the relationships, like the rise to power, like the story of greed, like the story of, say, betrayal and loyalty, etc., which I think are very universal themes, and I think she acknowledges this very much so. She also takes it into the realm of really what if a film is called the greatest ever made, so what does that really mean, and how can we deconstruct this or break this down into a meaningful discussion? And I think this is a very valuable point to raise. I mean, what does it mean to say that we regard Citizen Kane as the greatest film ever made? What does that say about other films that perhaps have equal, say, right to lay claim to such a laudatory statement? But what does that mean in terms of the attention given to some films over others, the establishment of a cinema canon, as it were, and Kane being arguably atop such canon, at least from many perspectives and viewpoints? What does that say about other films? So this is also part of the conversation that she touches upon, which I think is a very important one to keep in mind going forward. So please check this out if you can. Again, it's a very interesting, yet another perspective regarding Kane. Kane is a film where discussions also can be had from various perspectives. And so here is yet another one, approximately 15 minutes. And that's not all, because then we have maybe a 1990s archived interview excerpt with Martin Scorsese, and this is described as being from the Laserdisc. I should make a point here that whenever the menus make a reference to the Laserdisc, which is right here, the second release, not the first release, but the second release, spine number 142 in the Laserdisc catalog, they describe it as being from 1990. I'm not sure if it's 1990 or 1991. According to the back of the Laserdisc here, it says first printing 1991. And in fact, the year 1991 makes more sense because that would correspond to the 50th anniversary release. So I'm not sure if it's 90 or 91, but in any event, I understand that the menus here indicate 1990 whenever they make reference to the second release of Laserdisc. But here is another such reference, and this is to the Martin Scorsese interview, which is also included here. Although what we get in the Laserdisc is not necessarily the same as what is included in the Blu-ray or the supplements for the new 2021 release here. But in any event, we get the 7-minute excerpt from the Scorsese interview. And here he's talking about his first time watching Kane, the idea of the auteur theory, the idea of the march of time, and the importance of Greg Toland, and the idea of having confidence in filmmaking, how watching Kane and watching Welles work in Citizen Kane really gave him confidence as a filmmaker, which I think is a beautiful statement to make. The idea, too, about how when he first saw the film, it was, as he described it, maybe the edited version. And so after the fact, subsequently, when he was able to watch the film again in the complete version, as it were, that he was really blown away by its majesty and its power. So anytime you get the opportunity to hear Scorsese talk about other films that he really loves and admires. It's really, it's fantastic. You're in for a real treat if you haven't seen this already. So again, taken from, I think, the same overall interview, but maybe different comments are included depending on if you watch the Laserdisc or the Blu-ray. But overall, it's great to have this reminder of what the Laserdisc supplements were, as well as what Scorsese's comments are here. So please check it out if you can. Approximately 7 minutes. And then that's not all, because then we get what's called stills photos with commentary by Roger Ebert from 2002, and approximately 11 minutes. So what we get is, for the most part, a succession of stills photos, various, say, art or photos. And then as we were watching these go on, we hear comments from Roger Ebert, not necessarily corresponding to exactly the photos or the shots or stills that we're seeing at the precise moment, but still, it's yet an ongoing commentary about various aspects of KANE and the times, the times of the 1940s, what Hollywood was like, the aspects of the really revolutionary type of contract that Welles was able to secure in order to make what ended up becoming Citizen Kane. The idea of the auteur theory comes to mind, the idea of what the initial critical reaction was to Kane upon its release, the relationship, yet more comments between comments about the relationship between Wells and Toland, excuse me, and also Roger Ebert talks more about how he approaches Kane as a character. Again, he mentions the fact that maybe he doesn't like the character of Kane, but he says, while we might not necessarily like Kane as a character, we are curious about him. I think is a really astute way of describing it. He also talks about how he loves this film, how maybe it's regarded as maybe one of the favorites, if not the favorite, the greatest film ever made, etc. And he also acknowledges, I think, in a really wonderful Roger Ebert sort of way, just how wonderful those maybe laudatory, praiseworthy comments might be sometimes, but ultimately maybe they're not as important as, say, one's feeling and passion about the film. And you can tell that Roger Ebert is undoubtedly passionate. You could tell from the commentary track, and you can also tell from this. And so it's a really wonderful thing to have here as well. And also talking about the film, he makes mention here as a film noir. And so I mentioned earlier about how I had never considered the film as a film noir type of film until I was able to watch it in the glory that is the 4K UHD release from Criterion. So the comment that Roger Ebert makes in this 2002 stills commentary is something that I was able to catch up with almost 20 years after the fact. But still, thank you very much to Criterion for being able to include it from a prior release, the stills photos with the commentary by the great Roger Ebert. And then we have yet another supplement which is described as the opening, the world premiere of Kane. The world premiere is described as being from May 1st, 1941, Palace Theater in New York. And this is approximately 1 minute. Again, we got this from prior releases, but it's great to have that historical context. And then we finish with the wonderful trailer, a very creative, inventive trailer that's making use of the creativity and the curiosity about Wells, the idea of radio, and the introduction of many of the Mercury Theater players that will figure into very significant roles. And so it's a wonderful, lovely, almost tongue-in-cheek type of trailer. We've seen it before in many other past releases, but it's a wonderful package to have as far as this new release is concerned. So that rounds out the wealth of supplements that can be found on but one of the Blu-ray discs. So let us now turn our attention to the second of such supplements discs. So as I mentioned before, we have this essentially 4-disc set. So we have the one disc, which is the 4K UHD disc, and then we have the Blu-ray disc, which houses the feature, and then we have the remaining 2 Blu-ray discs, which have the features. Now, I've spoken about the first of such supplements Blu-ray discs, so now let us focus our attention on the third Blu-ray disc, or the second supplements disc, or the overall 4th disc in this collection. So what do we get here as far as the second disc of supplements is concerned? The first is My Guest is Orson Welles. This is approximately 42 minutes. And this is a supplement where Orson Welles' television appearances from the 70s and 80s are essentially edited together in this wonderful compilation and impression of Orson Welles a little bit later in his life and his career, and in particular his television appearances. I think Orson Welles as a celebrity and as a figure, a fascinating figure and celebrity, and just a man of charm and charisma. It came through a lot in his radio appearances and also in his film appearances, including Citizen Kane. But it also comes through in his many television appearances, especially in the 70s and 80s. So it's wonderful that Criterion was able to put this together and to focus on maybe certain aspects, various chapters that can be applied as far as this overall look is concerned. So my guest is Orson Welles, 42 minutes overall. And we have various appearances as well, various speeches. So it's a wonderful set of appearances. And so well done to Criterion for being able to include this. And so we have, for example, ideas about or discussions about his childhood, the origin myths as it's categorized, and also Orson Welles as a storyteller, and also talking about the industry, Orson Welles the pundit, Orson Welles the independent, and the stranger. There's some really fascinating anecdotes about Winston Churchill. There's the idea of movie magic and the magician's tricks and illusions. There's also discussion, of course, about his works like Citizen Kane, his childhood, the radio successes that he achieved, and also the infamy that was also achieved with respect to the War of the World, etc. There's also the interview, or the time his television appearance, where John Houseman also appeared as a guest. And so that was actually a very interesting appearance, which is referred to a little bit later in another supplement, because as some of you might know, the relationship between Welles and Houseman is a very interesting and fascinating one, which underwent a type of breakup somewhat early on. And so the television appearance is considered in a certain way to be a type of making up in a manner of speaking, or in a manner of that phrase. But in any event, that is but one of many fascinating points of reference that are included or touched upon in this overall brilliantly assembled supplement, which is called, once again, My Guest is Orson Welles, approximately 42 minutes. So please check it out if you can. And then that's not all, because then we get a supplement which is Knowing Welles, approximately 22 minutes. And this is also described as being from 1990, but it's or 91, because it's making reference, or making direct reference to the earlier Laserdisc, the second release Laserdisc from 1991. And so what this is another one of those assembly of interviews that are grouped under a certain category. Let me say that the participants in Knowing Welles here are Peter Bogdanovich and Henry Jaglom and Frank Marshall and Martin Ritt and Gary Graver. And so we have some really wonderful comments that are being shared here in this great assembly of interviews. Again, borrowing from I understand, the archival interview footage from 1990, 1991 that was then relied upon for the Laserdisc release from Criterion, the second edition release. But it's wonderful to have yet a further assembly of those interviews here. Again, Knowing Welles. This collection of, and we're getting another supplement which is focusing on Joseph Cotten, which is really wonderful. So the first is a 15-minute interview with Joseph Cotten from 1966. It's a black and white interview for Granada TV in the United Kingdom. And the second is his speech given at the AFI celebration of the career of Orson Welles from 1975. Now, the AFI speeches excerpt is approximately 3 minutes, and then the 66 interview is approximately 15 minutes. And so it's really wonderful to get these two different perspectives. In particular, the interview is lovely because here he's talking about Mankiewicz, and he's talking about aging makeup, and he's talking about there's a particular scene where his character, Leland, is drunk, and so they're talking, which is also referred to elsewhere in some of the other supplements, about how there's this drunk scene, but that actually what happened was it was due to certain circumstances of the shooting at the time, where Joseph Cotton essentially flubbed a line, but it was kept in because it really helped to heighten the illusion of him being drunk, etc. So I think that's a lovely detail. And so, and also talking too about, of course, Joseph Cotton has this very, very deep career in association with Welles, including Magnificent Ambersons, and also an interesting appearance in the film Touch of Evil, etc. So it's wonderful to get the perspective from Joseph Cotton here. So please check this out if you can. This is the supplements, or the sub-supplements, that is focusing on Joseph Cotton and his comments. And then that's not all, because then we get another supplement which is focusing in on William Allen. And this is approximately 20 minutes. This is described as being from 1996, director John McCarty. And so here we have the man who pursued Rosebud, William Allen, on his career in theater and film. And William Allen, as we know, he appears in a key role of the film, and also we hear him in a separate role. So if you're interested in as to what those roles could be, check out this particular supplement. And also it's mentioned elsewhere in the commentary tracks, etc. So he's talking here about his work with Orson Welles and Shakespeare and the Mercury Theater. And also there's reference to the radio productions prior to the emergence of Citizen Kane, etc. And also I should point out too that in the midst of this particular supplement, there's also some audio interviews with William Allen as well. So those are very interesting introductions or interjections as well. So overall, this is a focus in on another participant, another collaborator, another actor performer in the Welles troupe, that being William Allen, his key role, or roles I should say, within Citizen Kane. So please check this out if you can. Again, totaling approximately 20 minutes. Okay, that's not all, because the supplements continue on with a supplement regarding the Mercury Theater. And here we have one which is South Bank Show from 1988, approximately 50 minutes, 50 minutes, focusing in on John Houseman. And John Houseman enjoyed some really wonderful later success as an actor, and in particular his award-winning turn as a law professor in the film The Paper Chase. And so here he is given the opportunity to talk about his career, and his career which focused for the most part of his career, not as an actor per se, but in terms of the theater and drama, and his work with Orson Welles early on in the century. So and the Mercury Theater and Federal Works Project, and reference made to the production of Macbeth in New York and the like. And it's a wonderful interview or series of focus on John Houseman. And there is also mention of a type of breakup that occurred between these two men, Houseman and Welles, and talking about why that might have happened, at least from Houseman's perspective, and the like. Although, again, as I say, there was a type of maybe they made up, at least publicly or to a certain degree, or it could have been said that way, although maybe it's, well, in any event, you can see some evidence of that in some of the TV appearance footage that we have here or elsewhere in the supplements. But in any event, John Houseman is a very key figure in the world of the Mercury Theater, and thus in the world of the collaboration with Orson Welles leading up to the period of Citizen Kane, so the 30s and 40s. So this is a very important figure in this period. So it's wonderful to get this perspective here. So please check this out if you can. Again, the South Bank Show episode from '88 on John Houseman. And then that's not all, because then we get the Merv Griffin Show, February 5th, 1979, again, 18 minutes. And here we have what's referred to as, this is the joint appearance, where Orson Welles and John Houseman appear together after reportedly a long absence or a long breakup. And so Orson Welles takes the opportunity before John Houseman is brought on stage to mention this or refer to this. And I think it's, I think I'm not sure what the feelings were behind the scenes or backstage, but in terms of the television audience perspective, they seemed very cordial. They were sitting next to each other. There's a type of warmth in the air as well in terms of reminiscing, remembering the past. There's a type of acknowledgement of certain things that might have gone bad between them, but that's not focused on or dwelled upon too much. And so everyone seems to be in this jovial atmosphere, at least in terms of public appearance and outward appearances are concerned. So this is a very interesting, almost historical event referred to elsewhere and also referred to here. So the Merv Griffin Show joint appearance from 1979, approximately 18 minutes. And then that's not all, because then we get a number of radio performances. So we have the first being the Mercury Theater on the Air performance of Dracula from 38, and then the Heart of Darkness from 38, and then also the Free Company episode from 1941 of His Honor the Mayor. So the Dracula radio drama is 53 minutes overall. Heart of Darkness is approximately 35 minutes, and His Honor the Mayor is approximately 28 minutes. These are all fascinating in the context of a study of Welles and radio, and in the late 30s and early 40s. And of course, there is a type of wonderful way in terms of the captivating drama that's on display here, or that's being heard here, I should say. To the atmosphere is just through the roof when we're talking. If you listen to Dracula or Heart of Darkness, it's just through the roof. We also know too the significance of Heart of Darkness in terms of Welles's first foray into Hollywood, what could have been, but what ended up being, as we know, Citizen Kane. Also, I should point out His Honor the Mayor. There is some discussion in the Naramore Rosenbaum commentary about how one can view Kane in terms of the politics of Citizen Kane, and thus I think a discussion of that could be read into by virtue of an understanding of the politics of Orson Welles and company. Well, I think you can get a further indication of what those politics could be by listening to the radio play His Honor the Mayor. It is a very captivating, quite an ambiguous type of radio play, which is focusing in on, I think, a very core principle of democracy. And so I think it's very insightful, as well as being quite captivating in terms of a radio play entertainment. So overall, it's wonderful to have these radio dramas included. That's not all, because then we get a very brief 8-minute supplement, which is called Orson Welles on the Nose. And this is from David Cairns and Randall William Cook from 2017, described as being for the Criterion channel, the streaming service from Criterion. And so this is great because we have the various noses, the prosthetic noses, the makeup noses of Orson Welles over the various roles that he's played, or in some instances where he had no prosthetic nose. And that is certainly the case, I think, for his very famous, and also the importance of makeup appliance in the acting method of Welles and other people who are associated with Welles as well. Tamaroff is mentioned here as an example, which is really great. So the idea of the actor's method that was being employed by Welles, was it the inside, from the inside out, or from the outside in, as it were? And I think it could be said that in terms of the importance that Welles placed on the makeup, that appliance that would be used for a particular role, Kane, or maybe A Touch of Evil, etc., as some of the striking examples of that. Here we get yet a fascinating glimpse into the craft, the acting craft, the makeup craft that was applied upon each of Welles' performances. So it's a really fascinating, and also there's a comparison made to John Barrymore, which is a really interesting, insightful one as well. So this is really wonderful to have. So please check this out if you can. Orson Welles on the Nose. And then we have what's described as being the 1934 silent film called The Hearts of Age. And this is also, there's an interesting maybe introductory title that has been recently inserted just to give a type of maybe cautionary note or even warning about certain depictions that might be said to maybe not have dated so well, let's put it that way. But as far as a historical artifact is concerned, as well as being an early indication of maybe the visual cues and the visual interests of Welles as a filmmaker at a very young age. At the time, we understand he would have been 19 years old or so. So this is a very fascinating example of the early craft of Welles and the vision that he had with this very interestingly crafted tale. It's also been something that's been included in past releases, including the Laserdisc release, but it's nice to have this inclusion here as well. Again, with the cautionary note added at the beginning. And it's also so overall, this is yet another fascinating and interesting early stop along the way in terms of the journey of Orson Welles and his cinematic and visual aesthetic leading up to 41 and Citizen Kane. So, the Hearts of Age. So that concludes the discussion of the supplements discs that are included with this Criterion release. So now let us focus in on this particular packaging or presentation for this new Criterion release of Citizen Kane. And so I should point out that we have art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, and designers Mike McQuaid and F. Ron Miller. And so this is the overall packaging and aesthetic design, cover art design, etc., including the booklet, which I'll get to in a moment. Now, it comes in this digipack form, and as I say, it houses a number of discs. So you take the outer covering out, and the outer covering has this K, and the K font, I think, is meant to suggest the font that's used for the title sequences, you know, Citizen Kane, etc. And this font usage is applied in the inner compartment of this digipack release. So K, and then you open the flap and it gets A, and you open yet another flap, it gets N, and you open the final flap and it reveals the E, excuse me. So it has this almost flower-like petal, or flower petal-like construction, not dissimilar to a similar flower petal-like release that we saw earlier in the year with the Wong Kar-wai set. But here we have the 4 discs housed in each of the petals, as it were, in each petal having a corresponding picture of Kane at a various stage in his life. And so that's a really interesting aspect of it. I should point out, too, that you start with E and go back an N, A, and K. So it spells K, A, N, and E, Kane. And then you have the discs, which are in these envelope-like compartments. Now, I must say that I'm not a fan of the envelope compartment housing mechanism of Blu-ray discs or 4K UHDs. I'm just not a fan. I wish they could have had a different type of housing mechanism for it. But that criticism aside, I do admire this type of attempt at making a very unique packaging system, each with a various aspect of Kane's life, as it were, including the center picture, the center image. I thought there might have been a certain order to it, which, you know, E corresponding to what we can understand to be a younger time in Kane's life, and then the flap 4, N being somewhat later, maybe during his time in terms of political aspirations, and then here A, which is a little bit younger in his life, but then K, it's a little bit older in his life. So it doesn't quite go necessarily in chronological order, or maybe it does, I'm not sure, and I'm not getting it. But in any event, it's an interesting design setup for a packaging system. I'm not a big fan of the packaging system, but I admire the way in which it's trying to be unique and different while still maintaining the sense of the many different prisms or perspectives that we can look towards or look through when we're examining Citizen Kane. That's certainly the case, or it's certainly emblematic when we think of the various petals of a flower. That seems to be part of the overall packaging design of this, at least the interior compartment. And I should point out the back here as well, for anyone who knows what this image refers to. It's a very interesting image as well. Now, the cover art design, I know when the cover art was first announced earlier in the year, prior to the actual release, I know it got there was some debate, let's put it that way, as to whether this was good cover art or not. I thought it's really great. I think it's really great cover art, actually. I like its simplicity, and I just like the audacity of its simplicity. And it's meant to suggest, I understand, the font that's used, the typeface that's used for the actual opening credits. So I think it's really great. I prefer this actually because it's simple and straightforward and to the point, and it's grand and it's bold, and yet it's very mysterious, and it's saying everything and saying nothing at the same time, which is the perfect type of encapsulation of what Citizen Kane is and means to me. So I really like this cover art very, very much. I did when it was first announced, and I still do, and it's really great. Now, going to the booklet, which is meant to go inside here as well, this is a great, it's not staple because there are so many pages and it's thick. It's one of these glued in bound booklets because of it's wonderful. It's like a little mini book in and of itself. I should point out, I love the inclusion of this particular quote, which is found at the very earliest montage of the film, or one of the early montages of the film. I am, have been, and will be only one thing, an American, Charles Foster Kane. I know that when, for instance, I saw this in film class with other students, this line would always get a chuckle and a laugh from the audience. It does seem a little bit corny, and I acknowledge its corniness or potential anyway, but there's also something really apropos about the inclusion of this, recalling past comments from other sources of the supplements and commentary track, for instance, Peter Bogdanovich, who reminds us that one of the early possible titles of this film would be The American, and how this is an American story. And Charles Foster Kane is in many ways, this is the story of the American dream, or the American dream turned nightmare, or the American nightmare, whatever the case may be. And if that's the case, then having this quote is apropos as the inclusion of the film, and also having it at the back of this booklet. I think it's really, really, really clever. So well done for the inclusion of that. And then as far as the booklet is concerned, we have, again, the continuation of the use of, say, the font or the typeface that was used in the title sequences. So that is, I think, a continuation of the use of the typeface for the K, for the cover art, etc. And this is, again, the back title that I referred to just now. This is another intertitle as well. So the use of the intertitles, which I think is really great too, because it focuses in on text, the use of language, the use of lettering, which is, of course, the bread and butter, as it were, of the newspaper business, and newspapers, and the font and the typeface. And I'm reminded too of one of the great close-ups of typeface, typewritten typeface in any movie, which is found in Citizen Kane, spelling the words, using the letters W-E-A-K, weak. It's a really key and a very crucial moment of the film as well. But in addition to all the wonderful images and stills that are included, there is the great, underline, circle the word great, repeat it over and over again, great, great essay by Bilge Ebiri, which is called The Once and Future Kane. Wow, this is long, it's robust, it's detailed, it's very, it's comprehensive, it's focusing on so many things, well written, well researched, well argued, well thought out, a well written essay through and through indeed. So the Ebiri essay, Once and Future Kane. Please check it out if you can. Again, ideally after you have seen the film, and once you have an understanding of the plot and plot dynamics of the film, you can read this yet as another wonderful source of the background, production, and thematic discussion, or discussion of the themes and concerns of the film, Citizen Kane and the Life and Times of Orson Welles. The Ebiri essay, wonderful inclusion with this particular overall packaging from Criterion. So, my dear friends, that's it. That is just a bunch of comments that I have on this particular release from Criterion, this spine number 1104 of the Orson Welles film from 1941, which is called Citizen Kane. So perhaps not a perfect release, and perhaps there are some parts that could have been improved upon. Not to mention, of course, the little bit of a hiccup as far as the Blu-ray is concerned, but that will hopefully be remedied very, very soon, at least as of the time of this video anyway. But with all those points of criticism acknowledged, still I think we are getting this is a standout release, and it has so many things to offer in terms of the many discs and, of course, the film itself. This important landmark, milestone work in the history of cinema, in the history of the film medium, entertainment, visual spectacle that is cinema. And that is this film, which is Orson Welles' work, Citizen Kane. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very, very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.